Guys, I'm here with Bisher, who's one of the directors of a Bitcoin brokerage called Stormrake. And Bisher reached out to me and our team to share a bit of an experience he recently had that I think a lot of people will be pretty interested to hear about. So I hear you've been debanked.
Yes, so I mean, everything I do in around my personal investments is around Bitcoin. I deeply believe in it. I've been invested in it since 2016, and I invest in Bitcoin as a way to not only help my clients, but also to walk the walk. You know what I mean? It's one thing to say how great it is, but I also put my money where my mouth is. I got an email from, I won't name the bank, but would you like me to name the bank?
I'd love it. Personally, if you're comfortable.
Yeah. I got an email from the Commonwealth Bank stating that they're querying a number of transactions.
Yep.
Pretty much receiving funds from my business and then also sending it on to the business for Bitcoin purchases. Because we run a really clear accounting standard where we get to show where director payouts are going, where staff wages are going. Everything is clearly accounted for.
So you got director profits claimed into your personal bank account, and then you wanted to send money back to the brokerage to buy Bitcoin, right?
Correct, right? And so we wanted to make sure everything is accounted for line by line.
So you're not just buying Bitcoin from within the business and saying it's yours. You've got everything
correct. So that way it's a separation of the client funds and our own funds as well. So we were wanting to do the right thing by any good accounting practice, right? And so they were querying the transactions. I said, well, this is my director payout, and then also putting it back into the business to buy Bitcoin, right?
And whereabouts were you at this point? When
I was in Thailand, right? So I was trying to negotiate back and forth, explaining the source of funds. I said I can provide you an income statement. I can show you a proof of purchase as well, so that way you kind of understand where it is. Because I understand we run a crypto brokerage that's AUSTRAC registered. You got to make sure that things are compliant, check the boxes, all that kind of stuff. I understand that personally. Right, but when I went down that route of I'm going to satisfy the bank's
so you basically put all the cards on the table.
I was like,
good faith.
Here's my source of funds. Here's the proof of payment. Everything is accounted for. And then 2 days later, I got an email saying you're no longer a customer of the Commonwealth Bank, and they decided to kick me off entirely, and they shut out access to the net banking. They froze the cards. Now, for me, that didn't really faze me all that much. It was a minor inconvenience as to
So were you on Thailand for business or holiday?
Holiday with my family and my wife and 2 kids. And so for the average Australian, that could have been a debilitating move to freeze somebody out.
How long had you been a Commonwealth Bank customer for?
I was on the Dolomites program since I was a kid, right? And my first paycheck ever went into my CBA account and all that kind of stuff. So
they'd have like 20 years.
20 years of transaction history and all the increases that come with it and everything, right? But I advocate for a no debt and like minimal bank exposure policy myself personally, and what I advise my clients.
A lot of people I meet who are into Bitcoin really want to minimize their footprint.
So what ended up happening is I had about $500 worth of exposure to the Commonwealth Bank at the time of the freeze.
Yes.
And I was just going to be using the card to kind of tap and go, whatever, right?
Yes.
But when they tell me that I've got no more access to the bank account, it was more of a minor inconvenience than this like way that was going to ruin the family holiday. Because what I ended up doing is I went to Bangla Road in Phuket. There's like a central Phuket. And I converted 0.03 of a Bitcoin for 90,000 Thai baht, which is about an equivalent of 4,000
You would have lived
Australian
like a king.
It was awesome. It was like nothing happened. Like it was like I just went down there. My missus got a pad krapao. You know, the kids had a little mango smoothie, and nobody was the wiser, right? And this is the power of Bitcoin. It's a globally recognized asset, and it allows you to not have to be reliant on the banks, right? And that's a really powerful position to be in.
So basically you transferred money into the CommBank and then sought to transfer it back to your business. Did they make that transfer and then close your accounts, or did that get stuck in limbo?
No, the funds were already transferred out. They were querying past transactions.
Right. Okay.
So there was no issues with in terms of how much got locked up in the account or anything like that. I could imagine that if I had some, funds tied up in there, I'd be probably a little bit concerned. But again, I always advocate for like a minimal bank exposure policy, and that's really saved me.
I mean, everything you've just said, that whole story, it really puts the lie to the kind of propaganda the banks run about, it's to do with protecting your security and it's to prevent frauds and scams and all this sort of stuff, when really it's just anti-competitive behavior. They know that you're not their biggest customer, and they know that you're doing your finance elsewhere, basically.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So tell me a little bit, how did you become aware of the Libertarian Party and our Bitcoin policy?
So when I had this experience with CBA, I was already aware of the Libertarian Party through my friend Joel Jamal. He's based in Sydney. He does a lot of political activism, and he really talks highly about the Libertarian Party. And he's got these how to vote cards, puts you guys up there, which is awesome. So, and we actually had we did a little podcast together, and we actually dissected the Libertarian Party's Bitcoin policy, and it was like this,
that's
like
great. Actually, because I spoke to him just before, and he said that he was going to have someone on from Bitcoin to speak about it. That's really cool. Okay,
it was like a 9-step like policy that you had stepped out, which was awesome. 9-part policy, and so I was like, okay, you know what? I want to reach out to these guys. I know I've got a personal story. I've got a business that is being built upon it. I've already was aware of your policies. I was like, let's have a conversation and see how we can marry Freedom Party libertarians with freedom money and make it work, you know.
100%.
And that's awesome.
And the Bitcoin Alive, where we launched that policy, the day, like the morning before, like the day before the morning where we launched that policy, Trump signed the executive order for the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve, and we had basically decided as a surprise announcement, adding on to our policy, we'd already consulted and circulated pretty widely that we would support the creation of a strategic reserve for Oz. So that was pretty cool timing, and it was a really well-received policy. And a lot of, like, how I got into Bitcoin at all in the first place was I kept meeting some of the best and brightest people in the party were Bitcoiners, and they were sort of like, oh, you should look into this. And then I ended up doing a podcast with Sean Clark from G'day Bitcoin about the misinformation, disinformation legislation. So it wasn't even about Bitcoin. So his policy, his podcast is obviously very Bitcoin focused. But we weren't there talking about that. And at the end of the podcast, we got on really well, and the issue was really important. And after the podcast finished, and when I was in the studio before I finished up, he's just gone, he's like, you need to read these. It's like, you need to read Bitcoin Standard. You need to get, like, you need to get into it. And just the way he said it, I'm like, yeah, I think I probably should. So did the reading, did the research, got off zero, and sort of, still ongoing sort of journey, and everything with the campaign's been pretty flat out. But what would you say to people who are into Bitcoin and really see it as the way of the future? What can they do, and what should people do to put their values into action this election?
Well, I mean, you got to put your money where your mouth is, right? And this is why I believe that Bitcoin is a silent vote. It's a silent protest, right? There is obviously a back in the Libertarian Party all the way, and I love the policies that you guys are putting forward. But, you know, the best way to get ahead in a hyper-competitive landscape where cost of living is crazy, inflation is sky high, is that you can just have a vote, and that vote is with your wallet, and you just allocate your Australian dollars into Bitcoin, and you can have access to this wonderful network that's got hundreds of thousands of nodes spread across the planet, keeping your funds safe and secure and away from the grips of inflation and central bank machinations. So my advice to the general public and to people is just start getting used to Bitcoin. Download a Bitcoin wallet. It's free to do so, right? Read a book, Bitcoin Standard and the Big Print by Lawrence Lepard, right?
Yeah. Sean's been telling me about that. I haven't read that yet. I also read B is for Bitcoin by Daz B.
Right, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So these books, either download them on Audible, listen to them on your way into work or into the office. These are things that you can all do for free. But more important than anything else is just start diverting, whatever percentage you feel comfortable with. I'm not a financial advisor, whether it's 5%, 10%, 20%, 1% of your monthly, weekly, fortnightly paycheck into Bitcoin. Use it as a savings account, right? That's what I use Bitcoin as. I don't have a traditional bank savings account because they might offer you something around 4%, but inflation is around 8, 9, 10%. You're going backwards by about 4 or 5% a year. You stack that up over a decade, you've lost half of your purchasing power.
And it's really interesting because, I've heard a lot of people who are into Bitcoin describe Bitcoin as a hedge against fiat and a hedge against inflation. I describe a vote for the Libertarian Party the same way. It's a hedge against the Uni Party. It's a hedge against 100%. The regulatory oppression, the infringement on civil liberties and free speech, and the political drivers of inflation as well. So basically, if you're prepared to hedge with Bitcoin and invest in that kind of future with your money, then I think with your vote, you should absolutely consider voting one Libertarian. And 100%. If you don't have a Libertarian candidate in the lower house of this election, we're basically everywhere in the Senate, and every Victorian can vote for a better future. So
as they should. And it's like, this is why I get so passionate about this, is that when you marry good policy, with good money, you've got a chance at actually fixing a lot of issues that everyday Australians are facing, you know, and this is why I love what you guys are doing. It's something I want to continue to advocate for, because if you look at it this way, if the Bitcoin standard, if you will, or your strategic Bitcoin reserve comes into play, we can fix the government deficit with Bitcoin. And I think that's something that's really important to highlight, is that Bitcoin's growth isn't just this like magical number go up. It's that the central banks around the world, whether it's the Federal Reserve in the US or the Reserve Bank of Australia here, they're not going to be stopping printing currency anytime soon.
Yeah.
And so if we're going to hold Bitcoin instead of Aussie dollars, we have a chance at being able to eat away at the deficit and be able to increase the prosperity of the nation.
100%. And in the end, it's not really Bitcoin go up, it's fiat value go down.
Correct,
You know?
correct.
But yeah, look, I hope that if I'm elected to the Senate, I've already said to Bayani from the B2C industry body that, you know, I'm going to be having an event in the Senate for Bitcoin and representation for the industry and key stakeholders like yourself. So, mate, it was awesome to meet you.
I'll be backing you all the way, my friend.
Thank you very
so
much.
Cheers.
Authorised by S. Payton, Libertarian Party, Docklands, Victoria.